Welcome to the Hypervoice. I am your host, Stephen Morioka, and once again, I am joined by the incredible Alex Underhill.
Hello, everybody. How's it going?
You know, Alex, I wonder when I'm going to run out of adjectives to describe you, and I can't even remember if I've used incredible before or not.
No, incredible sounds pretty new to me. I think that's spicing it up a little bit.
Oh, excellent. Good to hear. Well, we got some cool stuff on the show today, and I guess firstly, I'd like to apologize for having 2 straight shows without a guest on, so it's just been Alex and I for 2 straight shows. Sorry out there.
It's been busy, but, I hope that Steven and I are providing enough to entertainment for you guys. We'll try to get guests on in the future episodes.
Yeah, everyone just has busy schedules, so we make do with what we have. But what we're going to talk about today, as a brief overview before we go more in depth, we're going to talk about some entry fees into tournaments, which has been a recent hot topic over the Pokemon community the last week or so. And we're going to talk about the October regionals that have happened the past 2 weeks. So that's Arizona and Florida. And Alex, you wanted to start us off with specifically the London International and, the cost for that, entry fees in general.
Yeah, so in recent news we did find out, and there was a lot of talk about it on various media, forms of media. The entry fee for the London International was announced, and it was around like £40 or so, and that equates for us about like $50. And so that was kind of a big deal for people because entry fees are something that have started showing up more recently in VGC, especially for like events like regionals and stuff like that, whereas otherwise they've been free to play. Premier challenges occasionally have had like small $5 entry fees, but over the past year or so, we've started to see regionals start charging $20 just to enter, and now actually these fall regionals have upped the ante and are starting to charge things like $40. And so this $50 entry fee for the London International was kind of surprising for a lot of people, and there was a lot of outrage against it.
See, what I don't really understand is how we had entry fees for most of the regionals last season, and there wasn't any prize pool to win if you got first or second, and there weren't as many complaints or outrage as we have right now. Considering that now there is a prize pool, and I guess maybe the biggest issue is the comparing ourselves to the TCG side, and what we pay to enter the tournament isn't necessarily as good as what the TCG gets, even though they do have a more expensive route for competing.
Yeah, that's interesting point. Yeah, a lot of people do compare it to the TCG and how they do have like more prize money to win. But like you mentioned, that they do have a more expensive route to competing, which is a little interesting. That's a whole nother topic on its own, just TCG and VGC compare and contrast. But I think that it should be mostly analyzed from the video game standpoint and what we've seen in the past for video game and entry fees and what it's going to mean for us going forward.
Well, we know several years ago that we were just pretty much just flat out, it was events were open to everyone, and there was no entry fee. It was just free to play in. And all you had to deal with was your travel costs, so flight, hotel, driving, gas, whatever it is. And, something we have to really question here is this a positive change? Is this something that we're going to see help our game grow the way we want it to? Because ultimately, isn't this what we wanted from, a few years ago? We wanted to become a bigger video game in the esports community, and while we're slowly getting there, don't you think this is a step in the right direction, or am I going, totally off base here?
No, I definitely think there are different aspects to look at this kind of issue. There are some positives and negatives with the introduction of entry fees. You could see an increase in prize money, and some people think that that's going to be a good thing for the scene and it's going to draw people in. But it's also going to like on the negative side, something that we've haven't mentioned yet is it's going to maybe shy away newcomers who don't want to be spending $40 to participate in an event that they're maybe not so sure that they're going to do well in. Maybe it's their first time and they just wanted to get the hang of things, and it's going to kind of hurt if they had to pay $40 just to go negative at a regional. It's definitely got some drawbacks, but there are some positive aspects to it as well.
See, it also seems like you're implying there that all newcomers are bad and aren't going to do well in their first season, which we've seen hasn't been the case. But I know you mean well with the statement. But, I think the issue here is for really the tournaments where locals could attend. Any tournament that would have a local scene where a brand new player would want to come in and play might get turned off by the fact that, oh, now there's an entry fee of $40. Do I really want to pay that much just to play in this tournament?
Yeah, there are like casual players who might come to just spectate or watch. I know from my perspective, like my brother sometimes comes with me to like U.S. Nationals, which I guess is a thing of the past now. But he would come with me to those kind of events, and I've always tried to convince him to compete, but he just hasn't, felt motivated to. And I don't think this is going to help my case getting him to compete at all. Just because of the entry fees, he's not going to pay $40 to play something that he doesn't take very seriously, doesn't practice year round, and it's just going to be really off-putting for the people who want to play a bit more casually.
Yeah, I could agree with that. I'm just grateful, we haven't had an entry fee just to get in the venue, so like a spectator fee. We haven't reached that level yet, but I think in the future we might be seeing that.
Well, hopefully that only comes with the game's growth, and that there's just so many spectators that want to come see these events that we're forced to charge them because otherwise the venue would get too overcrowded. But hopefully in the future the Pokemon Company continues to pick larger venues, ones that can accommodate for the size of people that want to come and spectate, the number of competitors as well.
Anyway, when you look at the perspective from a casual versus hardcore VGC player, you'd think, the hardcore ones are still going to attend all these events. They're going to pay the entry fee, whatever it is, $50 or less. We did see Arizona also had a $40 entry fee. Do you know what Florida's was, by any chance?
No, I do not know, but I think I did see somewhere that it was $40 again. But I mean, this is just hearsay. I'm not confirming that or denying it.
Okay, well, I mean that's fine. It's somewhere up in that range, probably like 20 to 40, somewhere around there.
Yeah, that's what I would expect, and I would expect it to be around there. And it's that's kind of like I think the jump from 20 to 40 is very significant. We've seen like a lot of talk on, like I said, social media where you can see what you could do with like $40, and it's quite a lot compared to just, going to a Pokemon tournament. And while it's very fun to go to these events and hang out with people, like the $40 entry fee just adding on to the expense of traveling is kind of off-putting, but it really depends on your perspective because, it is only $20 more. You could just look at it as like a travel fee essentially that you had to pay because a lot of the time you're going to these regionals that are farther away and you have to pay a good amount of money to get to them anyway for like the hotel, the travel costs, food and everything. And so $20 more shouldn't be a huge issue if you were prepared to drive all this way out anyway or fly or whatever.
Yeah, that's kind of a different take on it is, I've also kind of seen it this way is you have the locals versus the outside invaders. So people coming from far away, flying into your regional or coming from a very large distance. And those invaders, as you'd call them, are people who are flying, paying, probably at least $100 for the flight. And because they're flying, they're likely not going to have, a free place to stay or anything, or they're not going to be coming from their home and just staying somewhere where they don't have to pay for a hotel, which is what I was getting to. So you're paying for your flight, your hotel. So what's $20, $40 more really going to do when you're already paying hundreds more dollars?
Yep. Yeah, I agree that it really depends. Like you said, the locals maybe have a bit more to complain about because it was a free close event, and like those local casual people that might want to like stumble into a regional or something like that they see posted around, are definitely the ones going to be hurting more. But those people that are serious about the game, traveling very far to go to events, this shouldn't impact them at all, because it's just a small margin more. And I mean, the positives are that if they're serious about competing and they're traveling out to these farther events, the entry fees should lead to a larger prize pool, which should benefit these people that are confident enough in their abilities to travel out to these events. And yeah, it's just it's definitely a issue that you can look at from two totally different perspectives.
Do you think this will affect quality of play in tournaments? So, if people are willing to pay this entry fee, they will more likely be more confident in themselves to do well and compete, and, they would have been more well prepared and practiced for the tournament. Do you think this will have any effect on that?
I think that, like the people that are, going to stick around and keep playing are going to be the ones that obviously either found a liking to the game or most likely found a liking to the game because they were pretty good at it. And so I think the strength of these events are going to increase because there will be less casual players, I guess, at the bottom parts of it. But I think overall it's not going to be a huge margin more. You're going to see a lot of the faces that you have been seeing in previous years, but maybe some people who just want to try getting their feet wet will be a little bit shied off.
Yeah, I can certainly understand that too. And it would make sense for these next 2 months in October and November if regional attendance continues to, stay relatively low. And the other thing I wanted to ask you and what we could talk about is for these entry fees right now, the way it seems to be going is these don't seem like they're going to be disappearing anytime soon. And I don't think they should disappear at all. But in terms of growth, do you think we're going to grow the game this way in the short term and long term?
I think that in terms of attendance, at least for these fall regionals, it's definitely going to be decreasing and decreasing until the format flips, because that's when people are going to start to get interested again. I mean, with the waning interest and the increasing entry fees, those are both just kind of adding together to drop attendance completely. And that's why we're seeing such small numbers here. We didn't mention them yet, but the two regionals that have happened already, Arizona and Florida regionals, we know the attendance of those regionals, and Arizona reached 129 masters, while Florida reached 98 masters. And these numbers are relatively smaller than what we are used to seeing. I think fall regionals last year, Fort Wayne, we reached over 200, and that was in October. We reached, I believe, 200 and at least 20 something because we had a top 16. And I know I was at that regional, and that was kind of a big deal. We had crossed that threshold, and yeah, these fall regionals are looking a lot smaller this year, and it could be because of the entry fee, but it also could be in part due to the format and due to the maybe the dates, because people haven't had time to adjust yet to regionals being so soon after the format flipped, or not the format flipped, but so soon after Worlds, where some of these regionals are going to be later. It depending on the timing of things, but it's interesting to look at.
Yes, well, the entry fee is one issue. I think the not so great format is another thing that's adding on to it. And it's not necessarily that the format isn't great, it's just a lot of people don't like it. And that's playing a huge factor in whether people want to attend these or not. And people are just preparing for Sun and Moon. And what I mean by that is they're saving their money, they're saving their time to start planning out to go to events when the format flips, like you were saying. And in terms of growth, where using those entry fees again, in the short term, I do agree with you that we may see players not wanting to necessarily attend right away with the small prize pool and having to pay the entry fee just to play in, some of these events. But in terms of long-term growth, I think this is a good step forward. I know a lot of people aren't happy about it, but we're just going to have to deal with it. It is a not so eagerly welcome change to start, but I think it's necessary to have, and if we want to see any growth moving forward.
Yeah, I think my biggest concern about these larger entry fees is if they carry over once the Sun and Moon format flips, because I think that I've said this multiple times, I'm sure, on the podcast before, but I think Sun and Moon will be a huge boom for attendance in VGC. And the larger entry fees just might put off some people, and so from competing and traveling out to these events. Whereas, like in 2014, when X and Y released, the events were free, and that was kind of a big deal for people. They wanted to try this thing. Like that was my beginning in VGC. I was able to put together a team now and start going to these events and competing, and it was just free. It was something that I just had to get myself there and then start playing VGC, and from there, I was able to generate an interest in it. Like I didn't do well at my first event, but I was able to just go in there and try because I wasn't too worried about, the cost of things. I wasn't worried about wasting money on something that I'm not any good at because these events were free and I got a chance to try. It was very interesting for me. I thought that was a huge part of what sparked my interest in VGC was free-to-play events that I could just go and hang out with people without worrying about, my performance.
See, now for anyone going to London, as an example here, other than people who got those travel awards and stipends, you're already probably paying a huge... You're going to have an expensive trip no matter what if you're flying out to London for this tournament. Even if you're in Europe, that's still going to cost you a decent chunk from your wallet. So that's going to get thinner. And I know people don't want to pay more money just to enter the event, but is it really going to hurt that much in the big picture when you're already paying so much to go to that tournament?
No, I definitely think that for these bigger events like London Internationals, which is mostly going to be, I think, an event stacked with people who are more familiar with VGC, I think it's going to, impact the local scene a bit more. Whereas, I've read online that for some people, taking the train to London Internationals is cheaper than paying the entry fee for London Internationals, which is kind of silly when you think about it. So it'll definitely be off-putting for some people who are local to the area and are newer to VGC, but the veterans, it shouldn't impact them at all. Like you said, traveling internationally to London from like the US or wherever else is already expensive enough, and just adding a bit onto that to, increase the prize pool for everyone, I think is totally worth it, and isn't something really worth complaining about. But for the locals, it's definitely a bigger issue.
I think the biggest issue here is really how VGC players and TCG players are paying the exact same entry fee, and TCG gets a much larger prize pool. And I think that's one of the larger issues as to people seeing that isn't really fair. Is that fair to us that we're paying the same fee and getting less money for those players who do well? And, that's a whole nother issue, I guess. I do think the entry fee is a step in the right direction towards a positive future in terms of growing our game. I think that issue is, probably another one that stands out. But with regards to that, we'll just have to deal with it and move on. And Alex, like you'd mentioned earlier about the attending regionals for free and stuff, and how there wasn't an entry fee, and you specifically talked about attendance for these past two regionals we had in October. We had Arizona and Florida. Florida this year was 98, around 100 or something. That only netted those players who went their top 16 in championship points, so only those top 16 players got points. And if you look at Arizona, who had 129, they barely passed that kicker to get the top 32 points. And, my guess from that is just they were probably a little short of that, and they probably had to scrounge around to get some parents or random people off the street to say, hey, do you want to enter this tournament to play and help us out?
I don't mean to throw it back to entry fees, but yeah, that would be a little bit harder to do considering the $40 fee that you had to pay just to play. But it is interesting that they were just, short of getting top 32 CP. It's really unfortunate for those 16 people who, did well in the tournament, or there's several people who, just got bubbled out by resistance, which is a huge factor, kind of annoying at that level, where there's people who, ended up in top 16 and just missed the cut, even though there were some 5-2s that made it, and there was 5-2s that didn't make it. And then they're going down. There were some 5-2s who didn't even get CP because of the way the attendance-based threshold for championship points works.
Yeah, that's just rough. And, we could also just talk about that now, too, is how resistance is still playing a factor in these large tournaments. And, we've talked about this before, how we wanted to see this issue get resolved. And unfortunately, this isn't something within a TO's control, and that it is restricted to TOM, which is the program that prints pairings and runs all the Swiss tournaments. And if it's outside of a TO's control, well, people say, why can't we just fix TOM, fix that program? Well, maybe it necessarily isn't that easy to fix that program. And when you're having people going positive with these 5-2 records and missing out on, say, top cutting, when we could ideally have all X2s making top cut, where if we're not having that and people are still just missing out on points because of resistance.
Yeah, I don't think there's such an easy solution, because if we looked at Florida, I don't remember the exact numbers, but if we had all X and 2s make cut with over 100 people, well, not over 100, but just around 100 masters, they would have had about over 16 in the cut, which I think is just a little bit too much. I don't know. Actually, that is, going back on that, actually, it's kind of similar to Worlds, where we had an X and 2 top cut there, and we had about 100 or so masters in the second day of Worlds, and they cut to top 24, I believe. So, I guess there might not be anything too wrong with it, but from a timings perspective, it might be a bit difficult to run, because Florida Regionals just wrapped up today, and it would have been a bit harder for them to finish that event, because it kind of went later into the afternoon, and if they had even more players in that cut, they would have had to either stay later Saturday night, or woken up earlier Sunday morning, or stayed later Sunday afternoon. And so it gets a bit difficult when you look at it from a timing perspective, that sometimes you just don't have time to play all these matches in these top cut.
See, when it comes to that, I think that's more of a venue timing issue. Does it close at a certain time? And the same with the TOs, how long do they actually want to stay there? But from a player's perspective, you're not going to complain about the timing if you're X2 and you get to play in top cut, and you have an opportunity to become the champion of that regional or whatever tournament you're at.
Yeah, I definitely think that it's not something that the players really need to worry about, but it's just something that the players need to kind of respect with regards to the TOs, and, so they had to go through selecting a venue, and maybe the way they run their tournament is largely based off the venue rules and guidelines that they were given, or, like you said, maybe a TO just doesn't want to be running a tournament all day long, and then like the following day all day long again, because they have other things that they need to take care of, other obligations. So while from a player perspective, X and 2 cut is awesome, from a TO's perspective, it's definitely variable.
Yes, I can certainly understand that, and that makes sense from their end. They don't want to be there all night. Remember we had that California regional during the 2014 season when that format happened? They had over 500 players. They were, their registration started at 8 a.m., and I imagine there were a bunch of people there even earlier than that, and they didn't finish the finals until 2 a.m., their time.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's quite a lot of Pokemon to be playing.
Yeah, just one day regional. And, just speaking of large attendance, we mentioned earlier how Florida's around 100 now, and even last March when we were in the middle of the 2016 season, the Florida Regional had probably around double that, maybe like 180 people, and those were the numbers there when X and Y came out. So 2014 format again. I'm trying to remember how many were there because I was at that event, and it was either something like 250 or 350, but they got a lot more people than they had expected.
Yeah, and I think that's just part of the the hype that comes from a new game, and people wanting to play at these events that are free. They're free to attend, free to try out, and so we'll have to see how that goes forward going into Sun and Moon, and how attendance is affected, because I'm expecting it to grow. It's definitely going to grow compared to what we've been seeing in the 2016 season with, playing on Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire for the second year in a row. Not as much interest behind that. And then playing in a format that a lot of people weren't a big fan of, especially with legendaries. A lot of people don't like to see legendaries, whether it's like Landorus Therian or Xerneas and Groudon. There are people who just don't like to see these legendaries and Pokemon that they deem as OP. So we'll have to see what kind of Pokemon we're allowed to use in Sun and Moon, and how, the interest level is for it. If it's going to, convince a lot of people to go out to events, or if they're going to just want to sit home and play the end game and play in formats online with their friends and stuff like that, instead of traveling out to these events and playing VGC.
And just really going quickly back to Tom, whatever the cut size is, whether it's top 8 or top 16, it is an issue that is restricted to the program. We can't really change much about that until, something happens with that from the technological standpoint there. So we're just going to have to deal with the top 8 cuts and some X2s getting in and a bunch of others not. Do you like having just a set top 8 cut, or would you rather have all just X1s cut, just so it's fair? Because, I don't think it's fair that some X2s get in and some don't. But, that just happens to be the case, and they're just the lucky ones.
Yeah, I think that it's something that we played with for a while, and nobody likes resistance. Well, not nobody likes it. It depends on what side you're on of it, because when you're 5-2 and you're just hoping and praying that you'll make it into the cut through resistance, and then you see that you're 7th place or 8th place and you just barely squeaked in, you're really happy and you're like, wow, like I did it, I'm proud. And then when you're that 9th place finisher, you're just like, wow, like resistance is bogus. Like, I can't believe I got I lost my chances of making cut because of that, and that other guy got in. And I mostly think that we want to eliminate all forms of resistance, because it's something that's not in your control. You don't choose who you get paired up against, and then you don't get to control how well they do after that point. And so it's too much that's out of the player's control. And I think that, an X and 1 cut or X and 2 cut would definitely be a positive change. But if we had to go with the smaller number, I don't know. It's very hard to say, just because we would like to see more people make it into the cut. But in order for the sake of fairness, it's an interesting argument.
It really would just be fair to have, at least show us some consistency with that regard. Have all X1s in or all X2s in, not some weird, messed up number that happens at every tournament. But unfortunately, we'll stop badgering this issue. There's nothing we can do about it. All we can do is, make some comments about this, what could be done in the future. From the Tom standpoint, there's nothing much we can fix about it at the moment. We'll just have to be patient and hope we get some stronger solutions in the future. And we have seen that already with some of these past Nationals and Worlds tournaments, where all X2s get to keep advancing to the next stage of the tournament. And we're just hoping to keep on improving from there. But Alex, do you have any final comments on those issues?
Yeah, I had one last thing to just kind of wrap it up. And while it may sound silly, is that if you're afraid of resistance kind of, affecting your chances of making it into the cut, just, go out there and do as well as you can. Don't let it affect you. If it's maybe you've made it to like 4-0 or 5-0 in the tournament, you have to finish strong. You don't want to play easy those last couple of rounds, because you know that you're basically going to be making it, or like resistance is looking good for you. You want to play strong. You want to finish undefeated. You want to finish X and 1, so that you're guaranteed to make it into that cut. So while people are going to complain about resistance, my solution, at least the temporary solution, is to just do better.
Yes, you're right. Just do better. Don't blame resistance. Blame yourself if you're getting on the wrong end of those cuts.
Exactly. I'm glad you agree with me, Steven. If you're tired of, resistance, just barely leaving you behind. Well, look at what you could have done. If you'd gone undefeated, Resistance can't possibly, take away your top 8 cut.
Right, and this has been talked about before in VGC a few years ago when when we first talked about the size of top cuts and stuff like that. But in most other game tournaments, you have it's double elimination style, and once you lose twice, your chances of winning the whole tournament are gone. But in Pokemon, with the Swiss format, you still at least have a chance to make it into that final bracket, and you also have a chance to, just get points to move forward in the season. So Swiss is a good format for everything that it does, and that's all fancy stuff we don't have to get into right now. But Swiss is a good format for Pokemon. I think it's the right one for them, certainly. And I guess other than that, we can go ahead and talk about these past 2 regionals that just happened. Some of the players we saw come out on top, maybe some interesting Pokemon. I don't know how much into the metagame you want to get with this, but Alex, start us off.
Well, so Florida Regionals just wrapped up today, and we saw Ian McLaughlin take it all with a Groudon Xerneas team, I believe consisting of Kangaskhan, Smeargle, Gengar, and Whimsicott, Groudon, and Xerneas. And then we earlier saw Riley Factura win the Arizona Regionals with a dual primal team of Kyogre, Groudon, Gengar, Whimsicott, Cresselia, and Kangaskhan. So, interesting that these teams seem so different because you look at it as like, well, this one's dual primals and this one is Big Six or Groudon Xerneas, as you'd like to say. The teams look different, or the teams sound different, but they're actually very similar. I believe they have 4 of the same Pokemon, which is a very interesting aspect to it. Actually, I misspoke. My memory just slipped. I thought for some reason that Riley had Gengar, but I believe he had Bronzong. Yes, he had Bronzong over Gengar. So while the teams were very different, they did have 3 of the same Pokemon, which is an interesting aspect to note. But Riley did, in fact, have Bronzong. I must have been confusing it with, I believe Giovanni Costa was using something similar to that. He's been using Gengar, Whimsicott, double primal teams for most of the year. I think he used that at Worlds and at Regionals. And speaking of Giovanni Costa, him and Ian McLaughlin kind of share an interesting fact about them. And would you like to share that, Steven?
Sure, why not? So, this isn't anything major or anything, or it's not like trivia or anything, but, at the moment, they're the only 2 players who got regionals points from both of those regionals. So, they both got top 16 when they were in Arizona, and they both top cut in Florida, where Ian defeated Giovanni in the quarterfinal there, and then Ian ended up winning the whole thing. So, that's kind of, it's cool to know that both of them have half their BFLs slotted up with points, which is always good for them. And, other than that, some, other names in the top cut from Arizona, we have Patrick Smith, that's Salamantis, who also top cut Worlds, not surprising to see him there. Alberto Lara was also in the Arizona top cut, picking up some nice 100 points. And we have, from Florida, we have Ashton Cox and Wolf Glick, who both made it to semis in that tournament.
Yeah, it was definitely an upset to see William Collins beat Wolf Glick, I think, because the current world champion, you expect him to, kind of just take it all. I believe he's won Florida for the past 2 years, and so it was crazy to see Wolf go down like that, and to a Florida local, which was kind of crazy. You mentioned a lot earlier the term invaders. Florida is a regional that it's often invaded because, it's the state of Florida. Why wouldn't you want to travel to Florida? So a lot of people go to the Florida regional to participate in these tournaments, and then it often gets taken by other people. William Collins almost took it home for Florida, but unfortunately lost in the finals to Ian McLaughlin.
Yes, Ian's team was just too strong, his play as well, and Wolf was so close to that three-peat. That would have been really cool to see that.
Yeah, it was crazy to see the world champion go down just in semifinals. He had quite a regional streak going in 2015, and that streak might have counted part of 2014, or it might have part of 2016, I don't remember, but I think somewhere along the lines he had won like 3 regionals in a row. But but he just couldn't get the three-peat this time. He missed out on winning a regional earlier this year where he got top 8. I can't remember who no, it was top 4, I think. Do you remember what regional that was, Steven?
It was in the spring when I don't remember which one it was, but it was in the spring. Georgia. It was Georgia.
Georgia, yes, okay, Georgia, which I believe Toller Webb went on to win that one. But yeah, he came close there too. So Wolf just showing that he's incredibly consistent, but just not quite dominant enough to get the three-peat.
Well, hey, these are probably the least of his concerns right now. He just picked up an extra 120 points from that semifinal finish, and he won the big tournament. He won Worlds. He's not worried about this regional. While it will sting for maybe the next few days, he's gonna be fine. He's in good shape.
Yeah, and it looks like he's still trying to grind up CP because while he does have a Worlds invite, he maybe wants to secure a paid trip or that day 2 invite, and that's why he's still attending events, especially in the 2016 format, which he's shown to be pretty strong in. He wants to, get points early, get points in this format before it's gone, and Sun and Moon takes over, which we don't know exactly how that'll go for him. We don't know how it'll go for anyone yet. If it's going to be a good year for Wolf Glick, if it's going to be a good year for Steven Morioka or Alex Underhill, who knows?
Yeah, we'll keep dreaming, all right?
It's going to be our year, Steven. The year of Alex and Steven is coming.
Oh, yeah. I always hear that stuff on baseball a lot, too. So we'll see about that. But what was I going to say? Yeah, obviously, people want to continue to pick up points because we don't know how these travel awards are going to keep working out for future internationals coming in 2017. So it's always good to pick up points. You want to, again, we don't know what's going to happen with these, but you want to stay on top of the leaderboard, as far as we can predict. And it's always good to pick up points.
I'm holding out that we get $1 per championship point. That'd be a pretty sweet travel reward. Actually, no, that would probably be worse than previous year's travel rewards. It depends on what you finish. If you're finishing in the top 8 or something like that earlier in the season, you might only have, like in the 300s of points, which is a solid amount, but it's not as much as travel rewards. So, dollar per CP is probably not the way to go.
Wait, so is it right? Is it right that Wolf, he is world champion, but is it right that he does not have a paid trip to Worlds already? He only got an invite?
I don't know. I don't think he does get paid to go to Worlds. I'm not positive, and I believe he only gets day 1, which is just kind of interesting. We only see that kind of stuff for, I think, like, people say that it typically only happens when we get someone from Japan or like Korea or like an Asian country that they get day 2.
Because their system's different?
Yeah. So, because that's why Sejun and Shoma got day 2s, but our American finishers don't get it.
Ah, I see. Well, regardless, going back to what you said earlier about, Wolf wanting to get a pay trip to Worlds if he does not have one already, is that picking up these points will get him, a step closer to that. We know he's from the East Coast area, and a flight across the country to Anaheim is going to be another expensive trip. So, congrats to everyone who did well, especially Riley and Ian, who won the first 2 respective regionals in Phoenix and Orlando. And if you just want to talk about the quality of these players, these are big names in VGC. They are doing extremely well to start off this season. Riley's just picked up his 3rd regional win, and Ian, I don't even know how many he's won now.
Yeah, these are both players that, you expect to see at the top. You expect to see be doing well, and we've seen some pretty strong cuts, but we've also seen a lot of people that, at least from my perspective, I haven't seen before, so that's really kind of cool to see that people are still playing the game, people are still, pushing to be better and better, and so it's really cool that there are people that we haven't seen before making it into the cut and, making a name for themselves.
Yeah, exactly. These could be some breakout performances we're seeing, and it'll be an eager thing to watch whether some of these players' names show up in top cuts again in the future. So we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, I'm just counting down the days until that format flips and Sun and Moon comes out and we can, just start putting stuff together for this new format. It's been a long time coming and I'm so excited.
Oh boy, it's going to be a while. How about the standout Pokemon from regionals so far is that Whimsicott has won both so far.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting to see Whimsicott doing so well. It does have a nice niche that it gets the Moonblast at 116 speed, which is 1 speed point faster than Rayquaza, and so maybe that's the reason that people are running Whimsicott now is because Rayquaza managed to win Worlds, and so people want to get the jump on it. And Whimsicott is super effective on Dragon types while also being 1 speed point faster than Rayquaza. It kind of gives it a nice little niche there that might be why people are picking it up.
Yes, that certainly makes sense. I hadn't thought of that at all, really, because I haven't thought of Pokemon or VGC in a really long time now. Anyway, we've been seeing, pretty typical teams coming here and there from most people. You have Dual Primals, you have the Groudon Xerneas teams, and Ray Ogre, and otherwise, most stuff is coming out normal. There's probably some changes in movesets that I haven't been paying attention to at all, so I couldn't really comment too much on that. But we have about a month and a half left of this format to go.
Yep, and I still have to train because I'll likely be competing at the Fort Wayne Regionals. We'll see if I manage to go there. The timing of it isn't the best, being on Thanksgiving weekend, but I should still be able to go, and that's going to be the last one of the season, which I think is kind of going to be an interesting aspect. So, we could talk briefly about Fort Wayne Regionals and how it's going to be weird because not only is the timing of it sort of inconvenient, but Sun and Moon will already be out. It's going to be I don't know, maybe one of the least motivated tournaments. People are going to be, coming off of maybe a lazy time off from Thanksgiving, and also just, they'll have, like you said, I think in the last episode, people have Sun and Moon in their pockets, in their hands, the ability to play them, and they're going to play one more 2016 regional.
Right. Well, I always make that a bigger issue out than it has to be. We did get X and Y before we completed the regionals in the fall using Black 2 and White 2, so that's okay. What I did personally that time was I got my Pokemon X and didn't start playing it until after the last regional I went to was over. So people can manage their time effectively, but I do think that Fort Wayne did have some bad timing with the holiday. And you think about it, kids are going to be on Thanksgiving break, so they might be doing stuff with their families that weekend. And any college kids who were, say, go to school far away, they need to visit home from family, and maybe they also have family plans. How it's not the best thing in terms of convenience for a bunch of different people and different reasons that weekend. And we'll deal with it. I'm actually curious to see what the timing with the game coming out the week before and it being also the last regional of this format, what that will do to attendance.
Yeah, that's a good point. Some people might be interested in VGC, and then they might have Omega Ruby or Alpha Sapphire sitting around, and if they understand the championship format a bit before they want to start playing Sun and Moon, they might take their Omega Ruby or Alpha Sapphire cart, put together a team, and travel out to Fort Wayne Regionals if it's convenient enough for them. So we could see some people get interested with the revival of Pokemon with Sun and Moon. It's definitely going to be a big boom. A lot of people are going to get back into it, I think. It's going to be really cool, really exciting. And we're actually coming up on the demo. The demo is going to be very exciting, too. I can't wait to get my hands on that. What about you, Steven? Are you going to be playing that?
Yes, sir, I will be. I think by the time this episode is out, you guys will have already probably played it and had it already. So, yes, I'm very excited for it. Can't wait for it. Should be fun. And in addition to that is that once we get to that week before Fort Wayne Regional, I can imagine a lot of people are going to be contemplating, do I want to go to this regional to play on my old game and try to get more points in a, maybe a format I don't like so much, or would I rather play Sun and Moon and start getting ready for the next stuff?
Get out of my head, Steven.
And with that, we're going to wrap up this episode. We hope you guys, enjoyed and liked some of the stuff we talked about. And what you guys can do with that is, you can leave us feedback, you can leave us questions. And before we did not have a really good medium in order for you guys to do that. And what we have now is an email for the show. It is vgchypervoice@gmail.com. So you guys can leave us your questions or comments on anything on the show that maybe you would want us to answer, to talk about. Or if you want to leave us some kind of feedback, you can do that now in a more anonymous way than before, where there's either like YouTube comments on the YouTube version, or I post these episode listings on Nugget Bridge as well. So if you wanted to remain more anonymous with some of the ways you wanted to reach out to us, then you can do that. So again, that is vgchypervoice@gmail.com, vgchypervoice@gmail.com. The last time I'll say that. So please send us stuff. We would very much appreciate it. It will help us get some more topics to talk about, and we'd like to, that'd be great to have more interactivity with some other people. And last but not least, I guess we'll get out of here and let you guys get back to your demo or continue your VGC 16 prep. Alex, if people wanted to find you on Twitter, where can they do that?
People could follow me at Lexicon VGC. And Steven, what about you?
You can follow me at Super Morioka. I guess that will do it for our show. So we're all good, Alex, I think, right? Anything else you want to say?
No, I think that's about it. And it's been an exciting episode, and I can't wait to see you all next time.
Yeah, we have some very fun stuff planned for the next few weeks, and then we also have some really big episodes planned in the future. So hopefully you guys keep staying tuned. We're, working hard on our show, working hard on our episodes, working hard on improving as well. And we'll see you guys next time for more Hyper Voice. Alex, you gotta say goodbye.
I already did.
Okay, you don't want to do another one? Alright.
I think mine was good.
Okay, alright, I'm sorry. Alright, that's fine.
No,
That's cool.
You heard what I said, right?
Yeah, no, I heard it.
I said I'm looking forward to seeing you guys next time. I think that was a good little sign-off for me.
Okay, well, this will go on bloopers then if you didn't. Alright?